The Chinese regime has established a very broad network inside America's universities. This allows them to monitor Chinese students, to use them for various purposes, and interestingly, it also ties into something broader, the entire network of Chinese Communist Party subversion that includes its consulates, the front organizations, tongs, and also sources of funding. Now, concerns over these networks are sparking a lot of controversy right now. People are just starting to kind of uncover it. And this includes a new effort from the State Department to try to remove CCP influence from American universities. In a recent announcement, Secretary of State Marco Rubio said, quote, "Under President Trump's leadership, the U.S. State Department will work with the Department of Homeland Security to aggressively revoke visas for Chinese students, including those with connections to the Chinese Communist Party or studying in critical fields." He said, "We will also revise visa criteria to enhance scrutiny of all future visa applications from the People's Republic of China and Hong Kong." Again, Hong Kong having since been taken over by the CCP fully. Now, on this point, Harvard in particular, they've become a focal point of a lot of these efforts. A lot of the eyes are on Harvard right now. President Donald Trump is moving to pull the university's federal funding, and he's also looking to revoke Harvard's ability to enroll any foreign student, like any at all. If they're there, they have to enroll somewhere else or leave the country. Harvard is responding with lawsuits. They're trying to block that, and they're also trying to block efforts to even review their staff and faculty and so on. But the overall conflict is actually drawing a lot more attention to some ongoing problems. In a recent piece, the Wall Street Journal said something interesting. They said Harvard has trained so many Chinese communist officials, they call it their party school. And that's not like frat party, that is Communist Party, in this case, the Communist Party of China. This is what they wrote about that. They said U.S. schools and one prestigious institution in particular have long offered up incoming Chinese officials a place to study governance, a practice that the Trump administration could end with a new effort to keep out what it says are Chinese students with Communist Party ties. It says for decades, the party has sent thousands of mid-career and senior bureaucrats to pursue executive training and postgraduate studies on U.S. campuses, with Harvard University a coveted destination described by some in China as the top party school outside the country. Now, you might be asking, well, it's the Communist Party. Don't they need to be educated in communist doctrine? Well, look no further than America's universities, unfortunately. But it adds here further, Harvard didn't respond to questions for this article, but it also adds American universities have played leading roles in shaping China's overseas training programs for mid-career officials, which Beijing started arranging at scale in the 1990s as a way to improve governance by exposing its bureaucrats to Western public policy ideas and practices. Unfortunately, and a lot of communist practices too at the universities. And they said that have offered executive training to Chinese officials, including Syracuse, Stanford, the University of Maryland, and Rutgers, according to publicity materials and other disclosures. It adds that Syracuse's Maxwell School, on the note, Syracuse University also accused of having a very deep tie to CCP espionage. Their School of Citizenship and Public Affairs, for instance, helped set up postgraduate programs in public administration at Chinese universities in the early 2000s, a two-way street with the Chinese Communist Party. On this point, the issue of CCP subversion of U.S. universities is massive. It's such a big problem. For government officials, a big part of education at universities is credibility, right? Especially in Asian countries, the university you go to has a huge impact in terms of how your credibility is perceived. This is not just China, it's South Korea, it's Taiwan, it's a lot of these countries. If you go to a prestigious university, it's a badge of honor for the rest of your life. It's huge for them. And so, again, going to Harvard, big deal for them too. But a big part of this is something else. A big part is not just, education, learning about American politics, or having a nice, pretty badge of honor on a diploma. A big part of it is networking. It's the connections they make, because the individuals they're talking to at major universities, these are the future leaders in business, in media, in government, and other key positions. And so if a Chinese Communist Party princeling One of the sons or daughters of a Chinese Communist Party official goes to one of these schools, builds all these connections, and then goes in to have a position within the CCP. Guess what? They then have connections to public officials. They then have connections to business leaders, to journalists, to all the social leaders who then go into different positions in different parts of the world. This is one of their key tools to subvert and to maintain ties and to carry out espionage. But even aside from that, aside from having future officials attend these universities, one of the big things also in place is the overseas Chinese students and scholars, and even faculty at the universities. What is that? It's the teachers. It's the student networks. It's the individuals who work there. It's the researchers who get a lot of government money, including Pentagon contracts. All those big, juicy research programs funded by American taxpayers and being siphoned off for foreign interest. And the system also ties together the operations of the Chinese Communist Party, the Chinese consulates, local Tongs, front organizations, and even the students, the scholars, and the faculty of American universities. The CCP has put massive, massive focus on subverting American universities. Now, I've been researching this as well going back to 2008, and I published a thread on X of some of my research. Let me go over some of this. I've actually done on-the-ground investigations into some of these networks, including right here in New York City. I've personally investigated the CSSA's, Chinese Student and Scholar Associations, including, for example, at some of the local universities here. I've encountered them. I've seen their threats. I know people who've been threatened to be killed by them, in fact. They're very aggressive. The one at Columbia University was shut down several years back, actually. They never said fully why, but there were reports of a Chinese student beheading another student. They found the head, I believe, in the space between the walls. And these are very dangerous folks. And they're allowed to operate in most parts of this country. Now, here's what I wrote on X. The CCP is building spy networks in American universities and research programs. Secretary of State Marco Rubio is taking an important step to dismantle these networks by going after their visas, finally canceling them. I know that a few years back, I mapped out some of these networks, and these are some of my findings. A lot of people might say, hey, how can we prove that they work with the Chinese Communist Party? How can we prove they're funded by the CCP? How can we prove they're tied in with the Tongs? They say it, and I have it. In fact, I saved all of it. A lot of information has since been scrubbed from the internet. If you were to search for the surface websites, you'll find them removed. Luckily, I have the archives. I've been saving it for years. And for this thread, I'll mainly focus on the Chinese Student and Scholar Associations. These are the CSSAs. These are the associations run in part by the Chinese Communist Party at American universities, officially. They get money from the Chinese consulates. They get guidance from the Chinese consulates. They're tied in with a huge number of American universities, in fact, most of the major ones. And they're also tied in completely with the United Front. The operations are mainly run through the Office of Educational Affairs of the Embassy of PR, that's People's Republic of China in USA. That's, again, the official Chinese government branch that oversees and operates this. It seems they deleted their website with the information because they actually have a website that lists all the universities they have these programs at. They took the original site down. They pulled it offline. Luckily, I have the archive. I saved it. Let me show it to you. That's a lot of universities, and I will say every single one of those, every single name listed there represents a network that is a national security threat to the United States. Every single one of those. And as you can see, there's a long list of universities with CSSAs in the United States. It's also not just a U.S. problem. These are, again, Australia has a huge problem with it. Canada has a huge problem with it. Most of Europe, most of the world, in fact. Japan, South Korea, Taiwan, these are big problems. Now, you might be wondering, how can I prove the Chinese Communist Party funds the CSSAs? Well, they say it. They don't even try to cover it up. Well, they've since tried covering it up because they've deleted most of their admissions, but luckily I saved those too. I will show you the archives. There are too many examples on this list to go over, but I want to go over some. Basically, here's how it works. The Chinese consulates in each regional area will oversee the networks, the spy networks in their state and also several surrounding states. So again, you only have a few Chinese consulates in the U.S. You might say, well, hey, how do they operate these networks if they don't have a Chinese consulate there? Typically, the spy networks are managed by the nearest Chinese consulate. So the New York Chinese consulate will oversee the operations in a lot of the tri-state area, for example. If you go to, for example, other parts of the U.S., Chinese consulate San Francisco, they might oversee a lot of the western coast and so on. For example, one example of this, the Chinese consulate in Chicago, it runs the operations in Missouri, just as one example of this. But back to the CSSAs. Let's start with the network they have at North Carolina State University. This is an archive from 2016, and they directly admit the Chinese Communist Party's involvement, and also its ties to local CCP-linked Tongs, front organizations. These are the organizations they established to take over civil society. These are the guys inviting your business leaders, your government officials, your journalists on trips to China, where they will be subverted by the Chinese Communist Party and begin acting in foreign interest. Those are your Tongs. And here they state, the CSSA, that they are affiliated with the Office of Educational Affairs of the Embassy of PR China in the USA. They also state they're tied in with 15 Chinese organizations, which are, again, Tongs. And it says it is affiliated also with the Office of Educational Affairs of the Embassy of PR China in the USA. And it also says, besides all of that, quote, the Chinese Students and Scholars Friendship Association at the university has a, quote, good cooperation relationship, again, with these 15 Chinese organizations, your Tongs. It also says, importantly, this is not just students. You might say, well, these are student spies, get the students out. The problem is not just students, as it says here. It is also scholars, it is also faculties, it is also staffs and their families, as well as some Chinese, it says, who work in the Triangle area. Meaning, they state here plainly, the Chinese Student and Scholar Association in that area is tied in with the entire United Front network. And that's, again, not just students, that's a lot of individuals. The part on funding is in Chinese, but let me show you a translation where they say the events and activity funding mainly comes from the embassy. It says, quote, the annual activity funds mainly come from the embassy funding and also other organizations. They admit their funding networks to the CCP. Let's do another. This is the University of Tennessee. The CSSA there, they pulled this offline. You can no longer find this on the normal internet, but again, I saved the archive. Let me show it to you. This one gets a bit awkward because look, not only do they say where the money comes from, they also explain requirements. And these requirements, interestingly, could violate some laws on discrimination because guess what? They discriminate against students from Taiwan and Hong Kong. It's in Chinese, but this is the translation. And now let me show you this. On the part of it, Article 23. This is important because not a lot of them publish the actual doctrine. This one used to publish the doctrine, and I saved it. It says here, quote, the funding source of the Federation is the grants from the Embassy of the People's Republic of China in the United States, donations from all walks of life, and sponsorship of event tickets. If the students are Taiwanese or from Hong Kong, they also have to agree to the Chinese Communist Party's narrative of the so-called One China policy, which means they have to recognize there's only one China. There's no Taiwan in China. There's no Hong Kong in China. There's only one China. And they have to support reunification. What does reunification mean? Now, on that point, even America, to an extent, recognizes the One China policy. All right, fine, one China to an extent. Reunification is different. If you say you have to recognize reunification, that means that Taiwan, you cannot say it's its own country. You cannot say that you want Taiwan to be independent. You can't say you want democracy in Taiwan or anything like that, at least not for the long term. You have to say you want the CCP to take it over. That's what reunification means. Reunification means the CCP taking over Taiwan. That is a requirement you have to believe if you're going to be part of the CSSA, in their own words. Let me show you more. This is the CSSA cell at Boston College. And they say, quote, We are the only Chinese student union at Boston College acknowledged by the Consulate General of the People's Republic of China in New York. Importantly, again, because, again, regional networks, New York one will oversee the operations in Boston. This is Pace University. Let me show you this, where the CSSA network talks about connections with the CCP consulate in New York, and also ties to other CSSAs, meaning these are interconnected. They also pulled this offline. They deleted it, but I saved the archive. The CSSA cell, another one. This is at Hofstra University. This one is especially a little awkward, I will say, because guess what? They admit that all Chinese students are automatically enrolled in the CSSA. You don't have a choice. If you're a student coming from China, they automatically enroll you in the CSSA. And that's important because, look, not all these kids are spies, but there's pressure against them, and there are people trying to force them to do it, and this represents a monitoring program of all those Chinese students. They are not able to be completely free from the sight of the CCP. Now, I have that part highlighted on here, but I want to show you something else because, look, they deleted this. Again, I saved the archive, importantly. Now, this could all go on for a while. I could talk about this all day, in fact. But let's end with something important, right? A university in the headlines right now. This is the CSSA cell at Harvard Medical School. Good old Harvard University. Here they admit funding from the New York Chinese consulate because, again, you know, they're in Boston. And again, they deleted it, but let me show you the archive. The page for an event they had states it received financial support from Chinese Consulate General of the People's Republic of China in New York. Cheers. Look, the CSSA network, it's massive. This is one of the tools the CCP uses to keep Chinese students tied in with the objectives of the Communist Party of China. This is one of the networks they use to monitor the students. Again, you could say not all Chinese students are going to get involved in espionage. I know many who are against the CCP. I know many who come here to study and they again flee from China after coming here. They apply for amnesty. Not all of them are bad, but I will tell you, I personally know a lot of Chinese nationals who came from China. All the ones I know, at least, they're very much against the CCP. But I've been told over and over again that when they came to study in the U.S., they said they got pressure from the CCP to try to act as spies. When they come here, the CCP will call you or meet with you, and they will ask you to serve the motherland. All of them deal with this. The CCP does this across the board. The CSSAs, the Chinese Student Scholar Associations, it's not just students, it's the people leading them, it's professors at the university, it's faculty, it's staff. Meaning, the spies are not just the kids. The spies are other people at the universities who are entrenched at the universities. The CSSAs are the kind of heartbeat of the entire spy nexus at the universities. And it's important people know about it because of this. If the CCP wants to monitor all those Chinese students, where the CCP says, okay, if you're going to go there, remember, serve the motherland. And this innocent Chinese student comes to America, maybe they get a good research program, they're studying medicine, and they get into a research program doing, again, taxpayer-funded programs for the U.S., the CSSA network will know it. And maybe the professor will know it. And that professor will say, remember, I'm watching you. Remember why you're here. And that innocent Chinese student will get pressured through this network. Now, look, after that, they can either return to China with all that knowledge, brain drain, right? Draining it out from the United States, going back to China. Or, and this is probably even a bigger problem, they can get positioned in key targeted jobs within the United States while keeping ties to the CCP. This is one of the methods the Chinese Communist Party uses to place spies within different organizations, government branches, police, everything. The CCP can say, you know what? We need some special agents working in maybe the Department of Agriculture. What will they do? They'll use the CSSAs and they will target an individual and they will grow that student, and then the spy network, the CSSAs, will encourage them to get a job in that network. Or through the tongs, which interconnect with all this, the various positions there, they will even get them jobs because they have positions within the tongs. If they want maybe, let's say, a Chinese agent to get into American intelligence, they will have these Chinese students go into that. And they will grow them, again, nurture them, bring them up, and then place them wherever they want them. They can get them into government positions. They can get them into spy positions. They can get them into intelligence positions, journalism, media organizations, finance. This is how the CCP raises spies on American soil and then uses them against us. But look, on another point, back to what's now taking place with Harvard. Among the proposals on the table is that the Trump administration could redirect its federal funding to trade schools, something I deeply support. I like trade schools. I feel bad for Harvard, but I like trade schools. It seems that, Harvard aside, this could go with the kind of a broader trend happening in the United States. Because guess what? Higher education is starting to lose its appeal for Americans. It's becoming less of a focus. And this is actually across the political spectrum. It's not just conservatives. CNN, they even noted this with new polling that showed Americans are losing confidence in higher education. Watch.
What am I talking about here? Well, why don't we take a look at high confidence in higher education? You go back a decade ago, 57% of Americans had high confidence in higher education. Look at where we are now. That number has plummeted as of last year, down to 36%. We're talking about a 36-point drop among Republicans specifically. Get this, 68% of Americans said that higher education was on the wrong track. So it's a question of whether or not people agree with Trump's tactics, but they definitely agree with him on the idea that there is a problem with higher ed overall.
Did you get that? 68% of Americans think that higher education is on the wrong track. Again, not everybody, but it's a good chunk. Now, they might not agree with Trump's tactics, you know what I mean? Just because Democrats think education is on the wrong track doesn't mean that they agree with Trump on everything. But they seem to agree generally that this is a problem. And well, look, a big question is that problem ideological? Is there a huge liberal bias, which would be more on the Trump side of the narrative? Well, actually, yes, as well, even according to CNN's polling. Watch this.
Do colleges have a liberal bias? I think that's really the question here. And what we see in polling after polling after polling is that the plurality say yes. Overall, look at that. 45% of Americans overall agree with the idea that colleges have a liberal bias. Just 24% disagree with that idea. Look among Republicans. Hello, 67% of Republicans agree that colleges have a liberal bias. This is why Donald Trump is so emphatic and so wanting to take on this fight, because he knows that Republicans hate universities, hate the administrations, believe they have a liberal bias, and in fact, the plurality of Americans overall agree with the idea, agree with Donald Trump, that colleges are in fact a place where bias reigns.
That's pretty significant. 45% of Americans overall agree with the idea that colleges are too liberal. And I'd wonder if that's down mostly partisan lines as well, right? But look, on another point, this shift is even being seen among businesses. A lot of businesses in the U.S., and this is nonpartisan, it's not even a political thing, a lot of businesses in the United States, they are starting to drop the requirements for having a college degree, even some big ones you wouldn't expect. CNBC said this. They said it's becoming easier to get a corporate job without a college degree. 1 in 3 companies say they no longer list educational requirements on their salaried job postings, according to PayScale's latest compensation best practices report. And they say still, it's most common for companies, 41%, which is not that much, to say college degree requirements depend on the job, while a minority, 22%, say all of their jobs have a degree as a requirement. Again, it's not as many as you think. It says PayScale's analysis surveyed more than 5,700 business leaders and HR pros in late 2023, and they say as companies deprioritize college degree requirements, they're turning their attention to hiring candidates with the right skill sets. Ruth Thomas, a pay equity strategist with PayScale, said during a briefing with reporters. It notes the move could benefit the roughly 62% of U.S. workers who don't have a degree, according to the U.S. Census Bureau. Now, it's not just any companies either. This move is now being seen among some jobs that you kind of normally expect would require a degree. Even, for example, like Elon Musk, and he's building rockets and electric cars. You'd think that building rockets, he might need a college degree. Even that, he's not saying he wants a degree. Among the companies that have now dropped the requirements, these are also IBM. It's Dell. It's Bank of America. It's Google. It's Delta Airlines. It's a lot of others, actually. Business Insider said this: while figures like Tesla's CEO Elon Musk and Apple's CEO Tim Cook have questioned the need for college degrees, more and more companies are realizing degree requirements put them at a competitive disadvantage, as labor shortages are not going anywhere anytime soon, and the practice shrinks their hiring pools. In other words, if your competitors are only hiring people who maybe require a bachelor's degree or master's degree, maybe you're a tech company and you don't care what degree they have, so you're hiring like, somebody working in like rocket science, but the guy studied like gender science. Hey, a PhD is a PhD. It's a bit different, right? Whereas you have another individual who maybe does not have an advanced degree but loves rockets. Maybe they've studied them their whole lives and it's just their thing. But it says here, these companies are tapping into the over 70 million workers nationwide who've obtained skills and experience outside four-year colleges. Maybe self-study. It says maybe through community college, military service, boot camps, or working on the job. Maybe they had, apprenticeships. Maybe, for example, they, right out of high school, got jobs maybe working with, a contractor or something like that. Military is a big one here. Military is a real big one here. A lot of military service members, they might go in, they might work as a field medic, they might learn medicine, they might learn how to operate like satellites, they might learn really advanced things. But if they don't get a college degree, they might find themselves blocked from getting those jobs in the civilian world. A lot of military service members have incredible experience. A lot of military service members have done things. Again, it's not just war fighting. It's not just on the ground stuff. It's a lot of things. You can work in the military as a photographer. You can work in the military doing science, research. You can do all kinds of things with it. And they find that they are experts in their field. They have real-time experience. Maybe they were even doing it while people's lives were on the line. And they find they cannot get a job in the civilian world because they don't have a college degree. Well, guess what? A lot of businesses now are saying, you know what? That is expertise, and I want it in my workforce. And on this point, too, it says that this is also estimated by the workforce development nonprofit Opportunity at Work. And as more companies cut degree requirements, Burning Glass Institute predicts another 1.7 million jobs will open to these workers in the next 5 years. It says in 2016, International Business Machines Corporation coined the term, quote, new collar, blue collar, white collar, new collar, for positions seeking transferable skills instead of a bachelor's degree, which the company said in 2020 accounted for 15% of new hires and included roles like application developer, system administrator, software developer, and cybersecurity specialist. In 2021, another example they say here, IBM announced it had stripped bachelor's degree requirements for more than half of its U.S. openings. Now, that's going to be big, service members especially, veterans and so on, that's going to be big for them. I would say that the next big thing is government degree requirements. Government jobs typically require a degree. If you don't have one, it's a pay scale thing. Same with military, it's a pay scale thing. I know service members who served their entire lives and retired from the military, and maybe they could only get the rank of sergeant, because if you want to, I believe, be a lieutenant, you have to go to officer training school, you need a degree and so on. And so they're blocked from becoming officers just because they don't have college degrees. Same thing with a lot of government jobs. You have different pay scales, different degrees, and if you want to go beyond a certain pay scale, if you don't have a degree, you can work there your entire life and you will never be able to go beyond it. Whereas if you get a degree, you start off at that pay scale normally. And so you're fast-tracked. What that leads to, some would argue, you sometimes have less qualified people getting in leadership positions, while more qualified people who don't have college degrees, who have tons of experience, they're stuck within the bottom rungs of the pay scale. There have been some arguments and discussions around whether government should change that. So far, we've not really seen that done across the board. But look, in other news, many cases of alleged discrimination, they're now falling apart. And this has to do with a few things, among them being the Trump administration's different approach to civil rights laws. They're reinterpreting it a bit. You could say maybe going back to older interpretations. I'll be talking more about this after a quick break.
Experts agree. One of the best ways to protect against financial uncertainty is to diversify your portfolio. Learn how physical gold and silver can secure your retirement funds from today's economic challenges. With a gold IRA from American Hartford Gold, you can safeguard your wealth with no penalties or taxes when you transfer your current qualifying retirement accounts. Call now and our precious metals specialists will send you a free information kit, no cost or obligation. American Hartford Gold, a trusted industry leader with an A+ from the Better Business Bureau, has a 5-star rating from thousands of happy clients. Whether you are getting physical precious metals in a gold IRA or delivered to your doorstep, we offer only the highest quality gold and silver. For your peace of mind, we also offer a no-fee buyback commitment, a low price guarantee, along with free shipping and free insurance. So don't wait. Call the number on your screen today and secure your financial future.
Welcome back. We're now seeing many cases of alleged discrimination now falling apart. They do not hold up with current interpretations of the law. Now, this has to do with a few things, among them being the case the Trump administration, they have a different approach to civil rights laws. Big shift from the previous administration, but also within the government, something big is here. There's a change in how data plays into these cases. Washington Post said this. They said for decades, the federal government had to use data analysis to ferret out race and sex discrimination, winning court cases and reaching settlements in housing, education, policing, and all across American life, it says. It says now the Trump administration is working to unwind those same cases. It says further in, the Justice Department now is reviewing its entire docket and has already dismissed or terminated many cases that were legally unsupportable and a product of, quote, weaponization, they say, under the Biden administration. That's according to Harmeet Dillon, who heads the Justice Department's Civil Rights Division. Further in, it states, the review includes cases and reform agreements forged after years-long investigations that the administration says lacked justification. Civil rights experts estimate that dozens of discrimination cases involving banks, landlords, private employers, and school districts could face similar action. Meaning, get ready for it, folks. All those cases where people said, hey, this guy was discriminated against me, I feel discriminated against. Many of those, if they did not have actual evidence of the individual carrying out acts of discrimination, discrimination was not the intent, they might get thrown out. It says here, at the center of this effort is disparate impact analysis, which holds that neutral policies can have discriminatory outcomes even if there was no intent to discriminate. I'll explain that in a bit. It says the legal standard stems from Griggs v. Duke Power, the landmark 1971 Supreme Court decision that became a staple of civil rights litigation. In that case, attorneys relied on statistical evidence to show how standardized testing prevented black employees in North Carolina from advancing at the energy company. In other words, tests are racist. If you have a test in place to say whether a person is qualified or not, they would argue that if it results in, an outcome that has more people of one race than another, then it's discriminatory. That's the argument. They're now changing that whole thing. In other words, basically, this is getting rid of the legal interpretation of systemic racism and unconscious bias. The big narrative around systemic racism was this, is that even if you're not racist, even if you don't think you're racist, The system itself has racism built into the DNA. Everything was built upon racism. And they say that maybe testing, qualifications, things in place that require you to maybe have some skills at a job. I mean, on this point also, they would even say college degrees, that maybe those represent a type of systemic racism, because requiring degrees, you do have an imbalance on race in terms of who gets a college degree. They'd say getting rid of that actually does get rid of it. I support actually removing a lot of the college degree requirements. But the other side is this. What the Trump administration wants is, again, a merit-based system. People who are actually qualified. And that means Lady Justice and even maybe Lady Employment does not look at the color of your skin anymore. That if you're qualified and the most qualified, you will get preferential treatment. If you're not qualified, you're not. Doesn't matter what race you are. The other side of it is what they call unconscious bias. Unconscious bias means that even if you don't think you're biased, even if you don't think you're racist, you might be a racist. And they say it's built into our DNA. There were arguments saying that white men had no chance of not being racist because of unconscious bias, which is why at universities and businesses, they even had like unconscious bias training where they separate people by race and then like berate, like just criticize the white people. And they somehow said that wasn't racist. I would say that's extremely racist and kind of sickening. But look, on this point, the Trump administration is going back to older interpretations of what would constitute, discrimination, the illegal type under the Civil Rights Act. Because in the United States, under the Civil Rights Act, you can't do that. In the Civil Rights Act, right, you are not allowed to directly discriminate based on race, gender, creed, or so on. This is not just race. It's if a person believes in a religion and you don't like that religion, you can't discriminate against them. If the person has a political view, you can't kick them out of a business or push them out of government or kick them out of a job at a university. That would be violations of the Civil Rights Act. But because what they've done is they said, well, systemic racism, unconscious bias, they're saying, well, if you're a conservative, that means that you're a Nazi. And if you're a Nazi, you're a racist. And if you're a racist, you're biased. And if you're biased, you're in violation of the Civil Rights Act, and we can kick you out of this university. And they were doing it. They were doing that. That's all now changing. But also, look, because of how this is now being approached, it's also overturning kind of the other side of the whole systemic and unconscious elements within these narratives, which basically were used to argue that some groups of people could not be racist, even if they discriminated. For example, under the argument that some believed it was not racist to be racist against white people. In fact, this even led to the rewriting of the definition in Webster's dictionary. If you want to read the current definition of racism, you'll find that they tie it into this idea of unconscious bias and systemic racism. They tie it into social economics. And they've rewritten the definition to suggest that only white people can kind of be racist, and that if you hate white people, you're not racist. The law doesn't work that way. And this is what's important. If you go into the Civil Rights Act, or even if you go by older definitions in the Webster's dictionary, like go back 10 years, what is racism? It is when you discriminate against somebody or you hate somebody based on nothing more than their race. And so, yes, under the law and under the true definition of the word, you are racist, yes, also if you hate white people. And so that's overturning a lot of how the law has been interpreted and used in ways that favored one group over another, in ways that discriminated over one group over another. All of that's now changing. Things are different now. Under the actual Civil Rights Act, in the U.S. Constitution even, right? Post-Civil War laws, discriminating against any person for their race. And again, civil rights movement laws in addition to that, right? A lot of this was civil rights movement. Discriminating against any person for their race is in fact discrimination. It does not matter what that race is. It doesn't matter what that creed is. It doesn't matter what that belief is. Even in terms of religion and First Amendment protections, you are protected in America no matter how crazy your belief is, no matter how dangerous your speech is, unless you're calling for actual violence. you're allowed to say it. And anybody stopping you from doing that might just be engaging in a violation of the Civil Rights Act. And so on the reverse side of this, businesses, schools, even government jobs that had in place requirements where they were only hiring one group or another, where they were saying we want to have equal outcomes. This is the big narrative here. Equality of opportunity versus equality of outcome. The older way of doing it was equality of opportunity. We will have merit-based hiring. Merit-based, meaning may the most qualified win, right? The other side said equality of outcome. They said, well, most qualified, the system is rigged against some people, systemic racism. And so if the outcome does not have an equal distribution among races, then by virtue of that, it is discriminatory. And so what did they do? You had universities saying these positions are only open to colored people, or only to native people, or only to black people. And they were discriminating against whites and Asians in many cases. Businesses, governments were doing the same thing. Now, people are saying, well, that's kind of racist. How can you discriminate against these kids? If a child maybe did all these programs, studying nonstop, preparing for jobs, and they're told, no, kid, based on the color of your skin, something unchangeable, maybe you're Asian, you cannot have this job. You cannot get into this university because of the color of your skin, because there's too many of you. There were people being told this, and it turns out now that was a violation of the Civil Rights Act. And the new changes to this, going back to the older interpretations of the law, are making it so that businesses, government, jobs, universities, everything else, if they did that, even retroactively, they can be sued. There are cases that can be overturned, and people who were victimized by these ways of doing things may have some path forward now to maybe, get some repayment. And they're also facing, again, these universities, individuals, whoever was behind it, they're facing possible criminal charges. They're facing possible lawsuits. They're facing a lot of things, cases being overturned, even ones that were previously determined, because it was, again, cases of illegal discrimination. Big change now happening because of a shift in terms of how the laws are being interpreted. All right, folks, that said, if you have questions, comments, leave them in the chat. Let's jump into it. And happy Monday, by the way. First question, Gina Mikulik, you're saying equal outcomes are impossible without holding some down. Yeah, it's the case, right? It is the case. But again, I think that's only the case if you judge people by their race. I'm a fan of a colorblind society. I don't believe you should look at a person's race as being a criteria of their character. And I'd say if you go back to the Civil Rights Act, that was the motto. That's Martin Luther King, right? That was the dream. That one day we would judge a person by the color of their character, not the color of their skin. The content of their character, not by the color of their skin. That's a great thing for the United States to aspire towards. I don't think you should look at a person's race as the basis of judging anything. I don't think you should block one person while allowing, equality for another. Actually, this argument even goes back to the French Revolution. What was the slogan of the French Revolution? Equality, fraternity, liberty, right? And critics of the French Revolution, great writing. You can read The Law by Frederick Bastiat. The Law by Frederick Bastiat. It's a very quick read. Fantastic book. Frederick Bastiat has a lot of other writings too, but The Law is if you haven't read any of it, read The Law. Because he points out, it's a criticism of the ideologies of the French Revolution. And because the French Revolution led to modern socialism, it is fantastic criticisms of the very roots of the socialist ideology. What Frederick Bastiat said is this: the idea of liberty and the idea of equality are not compatible. You cannot have both equality and liberty. You have to have one or the other. Because how does it work? The only way to have a systemic system of equality of outcome, which is the equality here. Not equality of opportunity, but equality of outcome. The only way you can do it is by stripping some individuals of their freedom. By the very nature of equality of outcome, you need to remove the liberties of certain individuals. You need to take the successful and flatten it. Equality is a flattened society, right? It's a flattened society. You achieve systemic equality, equality of outcome. And I'm not talking about equality of opportunity. I 100% believe in equality of opportunity, but I'd say equality of opportunity is liberty. Liberty is equality of opportunity, right? Your freedom. Live your life. There's certain laws in place, but live your life, and your work and your effort will demonstrate your success. Work hard and you will succeed. That's liberty, right? The way systemic equality works is this: you have some people who are more successful, and you have some people who are less successful. And so, in order to achieve equality of outcome, you need to lift these people up. But how do you do it? You steal from these people, you remove these people's liberty, and you grant to these people additional liberties which were not earned. And so you do this. And so what happens within communist societies? Well, when you do that, what happens? These people say, well, why did I work so hard? Why did I try so hard? In American universities right now, I've been reading online posts from teachers who are saying this is becoming a problem because what do they have at universities? Well, no child left behind. Everybody's a winner. Participation trophy. Everybody wins. What does that mean? You have a student who spent 3 days working on a project, who stayed up all night studying for their test, who wrote a big report, drew pictures, did experiments and everything, and they put a ton of effort in, and they think they're going to get an A, and maybe they do. And then you have another student who did no work, slapped together something, maybe nailed a banana to a wall or something like that, I don't know. And that student is given the same result as the student who worked hard. Now, if you have a system where hard work is not rewarded and laziness is rewarded, what happens? You remove the incentive for hard work. And so it's not the case that this student keeps working super hard. What happens is this student says, well, why am I trying so hard? If it doesn't matter, why should I bother? If it doesn't matter, why should I stay up all night studying for tests? Why should I do my homework? Why should I go all that extra way if I can do nothing and I will achieve the same results as that kid who did nothing and got the same result I did? And so what ends up happening in socialist systems is this. Let's say that this is the middle. You have some people here, some people here. It's not like this. At first it's going to be like this, but eventually it's going to be like this, and then everybody sinks down together because this side no longer tries and this side never applied itself from the get-go. You have the entire society sink down. And this is why in every single socialist system, that's what happens. It's not that people stop aspiring to do well, is what happens, when there's no incentive in place to do well. And so it will decay your society. That has always happened. But back to the point, right? As Gina Michlik said, equal outcomes are impossible without holding some down. It goes back to the very point that was raised from the very beginning. Had we listened from the very beginning, we would never have had any of this. The law, Frederick Bastiat, late 1700s, noting that you cannot be both free and unfree, meaning liberty, which is equality of opportunity, liberty, which is the foundation of the U.S. ideology, liberty, which means you are responsible for your success and you are responsible for your failure. Liberty is not compatible with equality. Equality is an equality of outcome, not liberty as in liberty and opportunity. You cannot be both free and unfree. These things are completely incompatible. And if you want to be a slave, but I choose liberty personally. Another question here. Dexter's Lure Lab, you're saying equal outcomes require equal abilities, not equal disabilities. Yeah. And and it's good too. Like, look, there's a lot of things I'm not capable of. I would not know how to be a doctor. I would not know how to be a lawyer. I mean, I could probably like bash something together and make a decent argument. I really tried. But there are certain things I'm not good at. I recognize I have certain skills. I have deficiencies in other ways. And I recognize that a healthy society requires a mixture of skills and deficiencies. There are people who are maybe fantastic at medicine, but they're not able to like write an investigative report. I can do that, but I can't do medicine. And these divisions of roles also is what creates a healthy society, right? It's all of us kind of finding our own way and becoming good at certain things, and us developing skills in those areas improves the quality of life for everybody. This is another concept of like social responsibility. My job is my service to society. I view it like that. And I'd say even the American idea when it comes to work, Americans have a really different view of work from a lot of other countries. A lot of other countries are like, why would I care about working? I just want to go skiing on the weekend. I think, unfortunately, a lot of younger generations are losing the sense of pride in work. But work is not a bad thing. Work is the fruit of your labor. Work is something that you apply yourself to and you see the results of it. And so with this, I'm not jealous of a doctor. I'm not jealous of a lawyer. I don't say, well, how can they be better than I am, right? How can they be better at me in making shoes? How can they be better at me in building a car? How can they be better at me than making a computer? I think it's fantastic they're good at the things I'm not good at because I wouldn't be able to do it. The fact that they're good at it means I have a good computer. I have a good car, a very old car, but a good car. I can get decent medical care because I don't know how to reset a bone if my leg breaks. I don't want to do that. I'd rather have a very skilled doctor who knows how to do it better than I do. And so, when you talk about this absolute equality, as Dexter's Lure Lab notes, equal outcomes require equal abilities, not equal disabilities. If you start putting unqualified people into positions, if you take people who believe they should get something just because somebody else got it, why are you letting that person get this job? Are you discriminating against me just because I don't have a college degree and I never learned how to do anything or never went to the military to learn a trade? Just because I have no skills, you're going to give him a job? This is obviously discrimination. Well, no, what's going to happen? If you give people positions, if you give people merit that they did not earn, you're going to have positions that are deficient. You're going to have computers that don't work. You're going to have cars that break down. You're going to have doctors who give you bad medical advice and might kill you. You're going to have lawyers that get you thrown in prison when you're an innocent person. You're going to have stuff like that happen. The quality of everything will go down. If you start giving people things they did not earn. And I would say also, when you give people things they don't earn, it removes the pride you feel when you do something well. It removes the idea that you should aspire towards something, that there's an ideal that you want to reach. And when you have a system that removes ideals, that removes role models, that removes something to strive towards, that removes the idea of like self-improvement and refinement and art, what do you get? You get a very sad society, I think. And I wonder sometimes if even younger kids, I wonder sometimes if one of the reasons why you have this like mental health crisis right now is because we've done that on such a large scale. A lot of them don't feel there's a purpose in doing things. They don't understand why you would want to, work hard or something like that. They don't understand it. And so they kind of, they kind of wither away almost. And I think it's really sad, actually. I don't think it makes them happy. I don't think it makes anybody happy. Yeah, James Dyson, it sounds like a couch potato. Yeah, a very sad way to live. I don't think people would be happy with that. Judith, you're saying it also removes the perceived value of it, and that's even worse than a sense of pride. Yeah, I'd agree, actually, totally. Troy and Emmy saying, Josh, we were already there. Products and services are not so good now. Yeah. Well, and you look at some countries. Look at China. You know, people say, look, Chinese Communist Party, they get all these factories, all these businesses. How good is made in China? Not very good. Why is that? It's because they cut corners. There's no incentive to do well. You can trick people, maybe for the initial product to do real high quality, but they'll gradually start messing it up. Seymour, I saw in the chat you read the book. I saw you mention in chat you went and bought and read Poorly Made in China. I know the book's kind of old. I saw you mention that too. But the book talks about that. One of the things that happens, so if you want to have a product manufactured in China, let's say, you know, you've made a product. So get this. You can read the book on it. I know it's a bit of an older book, but the problems haven't changed. The problems are still there. It's called Poorly Made in China. You have people who, they have a patent, they file a patent, they go to China, they have a product made there. When they're like, okay, we can demonstrate we can make your product. They'll make your product at a factory, you'll build it there, pay for the factory, everything, you set it up. They'll send you the product design, and you're like, wow, this thing's great. It's exactly what I wanted. And then you'll find over time, they'll start messing with it. They'll start cutting corners. They'll start reducing the quality. They'll start diluting things. They'll take the expensive chemical and they'll replace it with a cheap knockoff replacement. And you'll find the quality of your product declines. You're like, wait, what did you do to my product? Why have you taken out this ingredient? Why are you putting this like toxic thing in there? Why is the plastic suddenly so shoddy? Why does it smell like poison? And they're like, oh, we innovated it. And then get this, not only will they do that, because they've altered your product, they then register the patent for the altered product, and then they claim that they own your product, that they own it now, and they're making their product for you. Like, that, yeah, that's the CCP system. It's just ripping people off. And unfortunately, you find that also. Even aside from socialist economies, right? From the get-go, people in sociology and people in economics noted that socialism would never work. And on the sociology side, this was the reason. Is because, you remove all the incentives, obviously it's going to fail. From the very get-go, even prior to Karl Marx, people noted that it would be a failed ideology. It was a failed system from the get-go. People did it anyway, right? And still doing it. But on that point, the other side you have is just criminal societies. Societies that don't protect innovation, societies that don't protect success, narco countries, a lot of Latin American countries where gangs run the countries, countries where if you succeed, someone's going to come and murder you and steal it from you. Mafia states, right? Mafia states, ganglands. That it also has the same outcome. And the other side is when you don't have a strong system of law in place and you allow people to rob and steal and murder and just take whatever they want from the successful, what happens is, well, what is the path to success? And well, it's joining a gang. It's joining the cartel. And then you end up with societies like in Latin America where the cartels are one of the largest employers, because that's the way you can have success. I was talking to, at one of the conferences, I was talking to a woman from Colombia. And she was saying, yeah, in Colombia, she said a few things. Well, one, because, what are they known for? They're known for cocaine, right? Cocaine, a lot of cocaine comes from Colombia. She said if you're sitting at a dinner table and the little kid at the dinner table, everyone's like, hey, what do you want to be when you grow up? The little kid will be like, I want to be a drug dealer. And grandma will be like, yay, good for you, my little El Chapo. You have these things. These are real cases because you don't have stigmas against it, because that's how you become successful. If you have a path to success that involves that, and there's nothing discouraging it, where it is encouraged to get involved in crime, because that's how you become, that's when you become successful through that, and you don't have a system to protect good people, you end up having damaged societies through that. And that's why you get narco cultures. That's why you get gang cultures. That's why you get all these problems. And so, you need to not only have an incentive to do well and to be a good person, but you also need to have systems in place to protect good people, right? Another question here. Number one, Tonya, you're saying China is already at war with the U.S., but Americans just have not woken up to it yet. Fully true. They do it in their own language, by the way. Real quick, too, Colombians, I know they're not all like that, but I'm just using one example because this was told to me by a Colombian friend. And unfortunately, I'd say in America, too, even gang culture and people like idolizing mobsters and pirates and stuff, like, I kind of see it as the same thing. Okay, let me get into this and I'll get into that question. It is bad, it is dangerous for a society to idolize gangs or mafias or pirates. I know that in our culture we've kind of changed the identity of these things because of how it is. But what happens? When I was a kid, if I bought Legos as a kid, and I had a neighbor who used to work at Lego, and she'd get us like awesome discounts. So I had tons of Legos as a kid. I remember the old Lego sets. You had pirates, but you had privateers. So when I was a kid, we had the pirate hunters. Those were the toys were the pirate hunters, right? Oh, cool, I want to hunt pirates. That's cool, right? Like older generations, you had the Indian Wars, not in like distant memory. When my grandpa was a kid, he probably still had like remnants of the Indian Wars. It's crazy to think about. We used to have cultures that did not support crime. We used to have cultures that supported, if you talk about like Tombstone, any of you see the movie Tombstone? Wyatt Earp and stuff like that? We used to idolize the guys who hunted the gangsters. We used to look at that, right? And yeah, you could say in America to an extent we have like an outlaw culture because we are kind of a rebel culture. We like the lone wolf or the lone gunman and that kind of stuff. Right? We kind of idolize that in our culture. But we also used to have more of an aspiration towards goodness. And I think that what happens is when you start idolizing gang members and drug dealers, when you start idolizing people who hurt other people as a way to make money, you might not think much of it, because you did not grow up with that culture. Maybe you just find it interesting, but your kids will, your children will. And as a way of being, and you look at kids these days, where they have cultures that do idolize drug dealing and murder and everything you can imagine is terrible, it affects them. You should enshrine an ideal, at least in my opinion, right? You should enshrine an ideal, because when you make the ideal something negative, that's what kids will start embodying. And if you look at a lot of the problems we have these days with gangs and drugs and violence, I think it's because we changed the ideal of what people aspire to. And that does have to do a lot with our culture and what we look up to. It's a bigger problem in some countries than others. But it's here too. It's right here in America that we've done this. Anyways, another question. You were saying, this is number one, Tonya, you're saying China is already at war with the U.S., but Americans have just not woken up to it yet. I think they're starting to. They're starting to, but it's not moving as fast as I would hope, to be honest. I've been on kind of the front lines of this for a long time. I know some other great guys and women as well, who've also been trying to tell people the Chinese Communist Party, like in their eyes, they're at war with us. And a lot of people said, well, it's business, it's like connections, it's we're engaging with them. Isn't that a better thing? Well, no, because they've used that to undermine us. And we haven't put things in place to stop that from happening. Like, how many articles have we seen that the Chinese military is engaged in cyber espionage and they're stealing intellectual property? How is it that the Chinese military is engaging in business warfare, economic warfare? How is it that the military of a country is engaged in stealing the pipeline of American innovation and then feeding it into Chinese companies so they can defeat us on the markets? They regard business warfare as a type of war. And we just let that happen. And we have, by the way. And we've done basically nothing about it. They've charged a few people, but there's no extradition treaties. We've let them do this. We've let them rob us. We've let them attack us. We've let them subvert us. We've let them steal our businesses, our jobs, our real estate. We've let them do this and done nothing against them. And so I think the problem we have is it's a different interpretation of law. A lot of people now talk about what they call unrestricted warfare, war by other means. It is culture warfare, soft power. It's the three warfares I've been mentioning a lot lately: psychological warfare, media warfare, and legal warfare. It's drug warfare, something finally this country is waking up to. Finally. The idea that, hey, why is the Chinese Communist Party supplying the precursor chemicals to the drug cartels? Why is the Chinese Communist Party doing the money laundering for the drug cartels? Why is the CCP handling a lot of the drug operations? Well, it's because it's warfare. It's a way of waging war through other means against your adversary. And they are killing more Americans every single year. They're saying now 100,000 Americans every single year. That is more Americans every year that were killed in the entire Vietnam War. They are killing an entire war worth of Americans every single year. And we somehow don't regard that as warfare. I'm glad people are finally waking up to it, but this problem is so... It spans so many different areas of unconventional war. In fact, I think if we broke down the actual charts that two Chinese colonels wrote a book about, I know it's not technically adopted into military code, but they wrote a book about it. There's I believe 72 categories of war they identified. 72 categories. Academic warfare, you get into it. Environmental warfare. They talk about all these things. And we've been so slow to wake up to this, so slow to recognize it. Finally, I believe it is getting there, but it's not fast enough. America, we need to wake up. We need to wake up quick because, this, and I've been saying it for years, this is the greatest threat to our country. And a lot of it takes place not through the Chinese military, not through the Chinese drones, not through these big drone shows they're doing. It takes place through subversion. It takes place through unconventional warfare, things we might not normally regard as warfare. It's all those tactics that they're doing actively as we speak. Ashley from California, you're saying, can we talk about the propaganda and hate education the CCP has school-age kids go through, including war role play with kindergartners? If that's not a new phenomenon, those are their students going to Harvard and other universities. Yeah, and we don't talk about it like that either. So in the Chinese system right now, they do have a type of military propaganda for all their kids. I mentioned, I believe in a recent episode, in China, in the Chinese education system, they have what's called slogan class. Slogan class. And what do? You repeat Communist Party slogans. You can think of it as almost like a religious ritual. If you're Catholic, you might have your Hail Marys. You might have the Lord's Prayer. You'll have prayers. If you're Buddhist, they do that. You recite the sutras. If you're a communist, you have to recite like Mao Zedong and Karl Marx and stuff like that. They treat it like a religion. And I'd say communism really is, it's an evil cult. If you want to call communism anything, it's best defined as an evil cult. It's an ideology. And it's an ideology that replaces God, right? That goes against culture and religion. And so if you're in China, and again, the CCP has a whole system for this, you have to do slogan class. And so your kids have to go in and be propagandized for like an hour a day. If the kid is slightly successful, they're integrated into the Young Pioneers or the Communist Youth League. If they do that, they have to study communist doctrine. There's like military training for them. They're brainwashed. And so you have these kids, and remember, a lot of the ones coming to the U.S., they're going to be from that system. Because of the way the social credit system works, because of the way the princeling system works, because again, the ones who have money, they'll be the sons and daughters of Chinese Communist Party officials almost across the board. The ones coming here are going to be the members of the Youth League or the Young Pioneers, meaning they've had military indoctrination and they've had deep, deep Communist Party indoctrination, and they've had anti-America indoctrination. And so they're coming here as part of that system. Now, on that point, I know a lot of Chinese students who hate the CCP. I know a lot of Chinese students who come here and they're good people. And again, I even know this is going to impact a lot of them. In fact, I had a call with a friend recently. She was saying that one of her, she's been here for a long time. Chinese expat, she fled the country. She said that her nephew is, kind of worried right now because he's in school, he's on a visa. And I was like, well, geez, that's kind of rough. But she's like, yeah, but it's a good thing they're taking their visas away, because she said all Chinese people know this. They know this. She said that when she came to the U.S., a Chinese official pulled her aside, his agent, and said, remember, you're here to serve your motherland. They know this. And so just because they're told to do it doesn't mean they're going to do it. Like they don't actually have to. I mean, there might be a lot of pressure if you get into something the CCP really, really wants, but you don't really have to do it. And so a lot of them will just choose not to do it. There are plenty of those cases. But at the very least, they all know that happens. And so it does create a type of like paranoia and distrust among the students. And also, I mentioned the CSSAs, the Chinese Student Scholar Associations, earlier in this episode. They work as the eyes and ears of the CCP at universities. So if you are a Chinese student and you join a democracy protest, if you're a Chinese student and you join some pro-America thing, if you're a Chinese student and you go to like a human rights event, these eyes and ears of the CCP, the Chinese Student Scholar Association members and professors and faculty will watch you and they will report you to the CCP. It blows my mind we allow those things to function at our universities. If I could give a recommendation to the Trump administration, if you want to get rid of Chinese student spies, start with the CSSAs. Because those are the ones who not only are just completely part of the system, they're the ones who are persecuting normal and good Chinese students. They're the ones hurting the good Chinese students. And if you remove every individual tied in with them, the faculty, the professors, the heads of those unions, the funding coming in, the Tong networks, you'll get rid of a massive amount of that problem. Huge part of that problem fixed overnight. And they're all intertwined. It's not even hard to find them. They've operated in the open for so long without consequence that they don't try to hide their footsteps. They don't try to hide it. Because again, I'm not just talking about this as a researcher. I've investigated these things on the ground. If one of these people gives you their business card, and they're ridiculous. They'll have like, I'm not even joking, like 7, 12 titles on their business card. They'll just list Chinese spy organizations on their business card. They don't try to hide it. If you go to the Chinese consulate websites, they post photos of themselves attending with all these different Tong leaders. They don't try to hide it. The Tongs themselves will plaster this stuff all over the place. And I don't know why we've let it continue. Like, I showed you today. The CSSAs admitting all these different ties. I mean, again, they've since deleted it, but the archives are there. You can still find it. And so, that is a real problem for our country. And I think it's good. It's good people are finally waking up to it. It's good they're doing something about it. I hope they understand there are certain ways to do it where you're more likely to get the bad guys and less likely to get the good guys, because not all of them are bad. You know what I mean? And so, I think this could provide a good roadmap for that. All right, folks, that said, happy Monday. Happy Monday. I hope you all have a good week. Join me again tomorrow, 10:30 a.m. Eastern Time. Please don't forget to share this episode. Help us get the word out. And thank you so much for being here as always. Please take care of yourselves, stay informed, and stay free. Thank you.